Who is on upset alert in week 3? What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1, and we're going to give you our 8 teams, our 8 games that we think are most likely to be upsets here for week 3. Going back to last week, it was kind of a normal week. 2 of the 8 games were upsets. We had actually the game that I said was the most likely upset, Mississippi State over Arizona State. That one happened. And then, of course, the big one, South Florida over Florida. That was also on the video. And you know, I said this last week. This is not just taking the most likely upsets based on point spreads or whatever, because I've taken bigger point spreads and put them on the video and put smaller point spreads not on the video. So like Florida, South Florida last week, there were a bunch of games with lower point spreads that I could have put on the video, but I thought that there was a chance that that one could happen. And the same thing in week 1 with Alabama and Florida State. There were plenty of games I could have put on the video that had smaller point spreads, but that was the one that just kind of got my attention. Now, I didn't pick either one of those upsets to actually happen, but there was just something there that made me think, yeah, I could see an upset in these games. And we've got a big one this week as well. So if you're new to this, we take the 8 games that we believe are most likely to be upsets. Not saying they're all going to be upsets, but these are the most likely upsets where the point spread is more than a field goal. If it's a field goal or less, then it just doesn't, it's not really an upset, so we don't put that on the video. So we're looking for the bigger upsets, and we're trying to find the biggest ones we can. And historically, throughout this series, over the however many years we've been doing it, 2 of the 8 games on average turn out to be upsets. So you guys can try to figure out which 2 will be the upsets this week. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes we only get 1. It's usually at least 2, though. Week 1, we did have 3. So let's jump right in, and we go from the least likely to most likely, in my personal opinion, for these upsets to actually happen. Like I said, Mississippi State, Arizona State, that was the #1 most likely upset on the video last week. Florida, South Florida was, I think, like the first or second game on the video. So that was not a game that I thought was a likely upset. But again, there was enough there that I thought it could possibly happen. So the big one this week, and this is a huge one. I don't know if we've ever had a point spread this big. Oregon, 27.5 point favorites over Northwestern. This game is on Fox. This game is at noon Eastern time. So yeah, I guess this is the big noon game this week. I didn't even realize that. The reason why this one is on the video. All right, so a couple of reasons. First of all, preseason, I was high on Northwestern. I thought this team could surprise this year. I may have been wrong. The Tulane game was a disaster, but maybe it was just one bad game. And then on the other side with Oregon, this is a team that, you know, very talented. I knew they'd be a good team, but I didn't know if they'd be quite as good as last year. Well, they looked great last week. They looked maybe even better than last year's team, but it's also possible that Oklahoma State is just that bad. So we don't really know about these 2 teams just yet. I think we find out about both of them in this game. There's just something there that makes me think this game could be closer. If I was right about Northwestern, and maybe I wasn't. Again, maybe I totally missed the mark with them. That's one thing. Just these teams might be a little bit closer. You know, Oregon might be a little overconfident. Northwestern really playing desperate after already losing a game. And then the other issue here is the travel and the kick time. So Oregon is having to travel across the country, across 2 time zones. I believe Northwestern's in the central time zone. So maybe they're Eastern. Yeah, you guys can let me know that. I'm not an expert on time zones. Anyways, regardless, two or three time zones they're having to travel. And the game is at noon Eastern time. So this is like a 9 a.m. kick for Oregon, which I don't think is fair. I don't think the West Coast team should have to play games this early. So there is a lot here. I definitely think that this one could be closer than 27.5 points. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Oregon comes out there and blows them out. But this is one I've got an eye on. If there is a big upset, and I don't want to jinx Oregon here, but the last 2 weeks, again, I put a really big upset on the video, not really expecting it to happen, and that's kind of the case here. I don't really expect Northwestern to win. But if the trend continues, we could see a massive upset here. So I think this is one to watch for. A lot of things in place here that you could see, that you do see on typical upsets. So keep an eye on that game. Next up, we've got Florida LSU. This is not a huge spread, but it's lower on the video for me just because of the way these 2 teams have looked so far this season. 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. LSU's favored by 7.5. I think that's a fair number. Maybe it should be even higher. But, again, it's early in the season. We don't know a ton about these teams. Florida looked terrible last week. Maybe they bounce back. Maybe they play desperate. LSU looked great against Clemson. Clemson is now, they didn't look great against Troy, so now you start to wonder maybe Clemson is not very as good as we thought. And so, again, we just don't know about these teams. And I just think Florida maybe playing in desperation mode after a bad loss last week, and LSU maybe overlooking this game a little bit. There are some elements here for a potential upset. So keep an eye on this one. But, again, based on performance on the field, what I've seen so far, you feel pretty good about LSU here, but that's not always the way it goes. All right, next we got South Florida, the team that pulled off the big upset last week on the road at Miami. This blows my mind. This game's at 4:30 Eastern time on the CW. I mean, it's weird to me that the CW even shows college football games, but the fact that they're getting a top 25 matchup, which I'm sure they didn't expect this in the preseason when all the TV deals were being decided for the first few weeks. That's just weird. It's on the CW. But anyways, Miami's favored by 17.5. So another potential big upset here. Miami looked great against Notre Dame, but that was just one game. Can they keep that up? South Florida's a team that, defensively they've surprised me this year. They had to grind against Florida, and they did, and they found a way to win that game. They've been impressive so far. So, I mean, it's an in-state matchup here. I think it will be pretty close. We'll see who wins it. But, again, potentially an upset coming here. We shall see. Next, we got Vanderbilt at South Carolina. This game's at 7:45 Eastern time on the SEC network. South Carolina is favored by 4.5 points. Not a big spread here, and I think that's accurate. I don't think the spread should be very high here. I know people will see, well, South Carolina's ranked number 11. It's Vanderbilt. They'll win easily. I don't know about all that because South Carolina has not looked, they didn't look great against Virginia Tech. Vanderbilt actually has also played Virginia Tech, and they beat them a lot easier than South Carolina. South Carolina, that game was 10-8 in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, I'm a little concerned about South Carolina. The good news for them is they're playing at home, so you feel pretty good. But Diego Pavia is a good quarterback, and he's a gamer, and maybe they've got an upset brewing here. I think Vanderbilt kind of feeds off of that underdog role, and even though they're playing on the road, that could actually just fire them up more. So this is one I definitely think could be an upset. Next, we've got another SEC game, Arkansas at Ole Miss, 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. Ole Miss is favored by 7 points in this game. I think that's probably a pretty fair line, but I'm not sold on this Ole Miss team. I know I took a lot of heat in the preseason for picking them to go, I think 8-4, or maybe I think I had them with 7-5. It's just not a team that's as good as they were last year, and I think we kind of saw that against Kentucky, or maybe Kentucky just has their number. I don't know. And I think Arkansas is a team that's going to be pretty good, so I think they're capable of hanging around in this game and possibly pulling off an upset. I like Ole Miss at home. I think they probably win this game, but would not be surprised at all if we saw Arkansas pull off an upset. I think we found out a lot more about Ole Miss and really just how good this team is against an Arkansas team that I believe will be much better than Kentucky. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of my view here. All right, next we got Clemson at Georgia Tech, noon Eastern time, ESPN. Clemson, it's favored by 3.5. I don't normally like to go with these games with the 3.5 point spread. I think it was a little higher when I made my list, and then it changed maybe. I'm not sure about that. Technically, it is more than a field goal because it's 3.5 points. But again, I don't usually like to use point spreads that are only 3.5 unless I just can't find games to use. But again, I believe when I originally looked at this, that spread was higher. So maybe it's come down. But Clemson, their offense seemed really off against LSU. And then the last game, it took them a long time to get going. If they have a slow start here, this is a Georgia Tech team that is good. We saw that in week 1 against Colorado. They're playing at home. I think Georgia Tech very capable of pulling off an upset here. In fact, this was a preseason pick for me. I picked Georgia Tech to beat Clemson, although I picked Clemson to beat LSU. So we're off there. But I think Georgia Tech very capable of winning this game. I think it's actually a fairly even matchup. Almost a coin flip type game. So yeah, I definitely could see an upset here. And then finally, I think we have 2 more. Colorado, Houston. This one is Friday night, 7:30 Eastern time on ESPN. Houston favored by 5.5 points. We don't really know a lot about Houston. Colorado really kind of blew that game because Georgia Tech, they had a lot of opportunities. I still think this is a pretty good Colorado team and a Houston team that I'm not sure how good they are. So I think we learn a lot about Houston in this game. But yeah, so this is just one I'm just not sure about. So because of that, I think Colorado absolutely could pull off an upset here on the road. And then finally, here's the last one. 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Notre Dame favored by 6.5. I know, this is a really weird one for me because I picked Texas A&M in the preseason. I thought they would win this game, even on the road. Notre Dame, with a new quarterback, I kind of question them. But I thought C.J. Carr looked really good against Miami. It was more like the offensive line and some other issues for them. So at this point, I just don't know. Because, again, I think Notre Dame better at quarterback than I thought. The rest of the team, though, maybe not as good as I thought, or in some areas at least. It's just this is a tough one for me. This is truly a toss-up game. Again, preseason I picked Texas A&M because Notre Dame is at home. Maybe I would go with them this time if I had to pick this week. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is probably the most likely upset of the week. I do think Texas A&M very capable of pulling it off. So those are my upset picks for week 3. Give me your thoughts and your upset picks down in the comments below.